Good afternoon. It's been 1,703 days since the murderer committed the mass shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. And if this was not the most perfect death penalty case, then why do we have the death penalty at all? There's no doubt about the fact that the verdict should have been the death penalty. I believe that our state's attorneys, okay, all of them, all of our state's attorneys, whether it be Mr. Sachs, whether it be Carolyn McCann, whether it be Jeff Marcus, Nicole, Stephen, Aaron, we could have not had a more perfect state's attorney group. No way. Mr. Sachs told me when we first learned that he was taking this case on, he said to me, I promise you that this will not just be another mass shooting. By the time we're finished with this case, every single person who was murdered, people will know who they are. They will not just be a name, but people will know exactly who they are, will know a face, and will know everything about them. And that's exactly what he did. You talk about being disappointed. We are all disappointed, okay? All of us, because they could not have done a better job. They could not have proven their case any better than they did. We all know their case was proven. But again, we have jurors, and there's no doubt in my mind that somewhere along when they chose their jury, they had to be told, I'm pretty sure, that, you know, they would consider the death penalty. Somewhere along the line, one of those jurors had to have said, I know he committed these crimes, I know he deserves to be punished, but I can't be the one to put someone to death. And that is the only way that we did not get the death penalty. My son was murdered along with 16 other people, and this animal, okay, still is going to now have life in prison without parole. And let me tell you something, as far as I'm concerned, he's probably gonna get taken out sooner than later if he did get the death penalty. Because we know that a death penalty case, I believe in Florida, takes a lot longer. I think it's somewhere, the average is somewhere close to 18 years, okay? I'd certainly be dead and buried before he would be. So as far as I'm concerned, the fact that he's going to go into some sort of general population, he's going to have to look over his shoulder every minute of the rest of his life. Just the way the fear in him, I hope he has the fear in him every second of his life, just the way he gave that fear to every one of our loved ones who he murdered, or the students and people that he harmed. He should live in that fear, and he should be afraid every second of the day of his life.
Just to add, okay, about fear, this is what my son saw. He saw the gunman as he turned and pulled the trigger. This is what the jury didn't think was worth capital punishment. Answer me why, how, that my son be shot by this animal, like this. People need to see this. This is real. This is not a game. This is not a video. This is not a TV or a movie. This is real. The last thing my son saw was the gunman aiming at him.
And let me tell you something, we're not going to stop. I'm going to tell every single person here, we will never stop fighting. We are never going to stop fighting so that these animals can't go into, whether it's schools, movie theaters, places of worship, you name it. We're going to fight with them so we don't have to keep looking over our shoulder and wondering when we send our kids to school or our loved ones go to work at school or go to work anywhere, okay, that we could possibly never speak to them again. We're going to continue to fight, and we're going to make sure that that AR-15 and those assault weapons that killed our loved ones are taken off the streets. And that's what we're going to continue to do. Because this should not happen to anyone else. This should never happen. We should not have to worry about, even ourselves, walking around the streets that somebody's going to murder us with a gun that they illegally own or illegally own and have gone off the deep end somewhere and decided that they're going to take their anger out on someone else.
And this verdict today gives license to anyone who wants to claim they have a mental illness to kill people.
Sure, all I have to do is have a mental illness, not a problem, okay? One of my attorneys is going to do a mitigating factor that I'm a human being, okay? That's one of the mitigating factors. He's a human being, okay? And that gives him license to just, him or her, license to go in and kill people. This is ridiculous. This should be the case that makes people stop and say, oh my God, I better not do that because I can get, I can get the death penalty. This is the case now. You know what? I can do it, not a problem, and I can get off and I can have life in prison without parole.
Do you believe that one juror or more lied to get on this jury?
I won't say lied.
No.
Maybe when they were originally questioned, they thought they could do it, but when push comes to shove, maybe they realized that they couldn't.
We can't damn the jurors. Come on. I mean, if that's how I come across, I apologize. These jurors sat there since July 18th, day in and day out. Let me tell you something. They're the people that we need to give therapy to, because here they are. They watched. They went into the 1200 building. They saw all the autopsy photos. They saw some things that we never got to see, and you certainly didn't get to see. I mean, they did their job. There's no doubt about it. But when push came to shove at the very end, like all of the aggravating factors, they all checked them all off. There was no doubt about that those aggravating factors were all checked off.
Some of the other parents, it seemed they were lashing out.
I'm sorry, I can't. It's going to have to be one at a time. It's hard enough to hear one. I'm sorry?
Your husband once wrote in the Sun Sentinel about having to sit through this and relive it.
This was 3 years ago. This was yeah.
About it now that you've gone through it.
3 years ago, I didn't know a third of what I know through the trial. If I knew what I know now, back then, I would never have said what I said. Okay, this animal deserves to die. He hunted all these people. He planned this for months. I didn't know that he had planned it for months when I wrote that article. No, I take back everything I said in that op-ed. He should die.
And you mentioned that some of the parents who preceded you did seem like they were very angry and lashing out at the individual jurors. But you're saying that you don't believe the jurors themselves are at fault. Do you have any sort of understanding of how one of them could have found a mitigating factor to spare?
There is no mitigating factor at all that could overshadow, the aggravating factors. There are just none. And I'm not sure, I mean, I can't speak for them, but I'm not sure that, maybe an hour after we were all let out of the gallery, that people's emotions didn't come out in ways that maybe, I'm not sure that it's really anger at the jurors. It's anger at, it's anger at the sentencing. It's
angry at the system.
Yeah,
okay?
it's angry, really.
It's really angry at the system.
You can't go after a juror. They did their job. They went day in and day out. It's not easy. But, you're totally angry at the system. I mean, I know we have a legal system, but is it just? I mean, let's ask ourselves that question. We certainly do have a legal system. I'm not sure it's so just all the time.
Justice was not served today.
We saw you looking at your son's picture in the courtroom, moving forward, now feeling that justice may not have been served for your son. Is it any different for you when you look at that picture? I know there's no closure, but now are you even more angry or?
There's never closure, okay? This is a chapter that's closed. I'm not sure of the epilogue yet because I haven't really been able to process. It's a chapter that's closed. I'm never going to get closure. I'm never going to get my son back, whether it was the death penalty or life in prison without parole. Scott's not coming back, okay? That's just the way it is. A little aside, if you notice, when they were talking about Scott and she was talking about the counts, they had a little bit of tumult, That was my son. There's no doubt that was my son telling us, you know what, Mom, I'm here. But as far as closure, there's no closure. There's no closure when your son is murdered, okay? There is not. And for me, the anger stays here. Every once in a while, the lid gets taken off, but the anger stays here. The anger is always going to be here. And I'm going to tell you something. I never thought that I could be so ugly inside, but I wait and welcome the day that I get that call that tells me that that murderer was murdered in prison. And that's going to be a very happy day in my life.
And just one more thing. They talk about the victims, the 17 people who were killed. Every person in the Parkland community is a victim. Everyone. So don't play that down at all, okay? On February 14th, 2018, everyone here was a victim. February 14th is also my daughter's birthday. Imagine how we celebrate or don't celebrate her birthday. Imagine the fact that some of her friends don't like to call her on her birthday because they didn't know what to say. My birthday is February 16th. I was making funeral arrangements for our son on my birthday. Everybody is a victim. There are no survivors of a mass shooting. There's different levels of victimhood, if that's a word. Thank you.
Thank you so much.